Hi everyone, this is your host Siddharth Shivkumar, Community Manager at Aviyel. Aviyel is on a mission to help open source projects sustain by building a community of open source enthusiasts and incentivizing their efforts. I'd like to welcome all of you to the first edition of Community Spotlight. Community Spotlight is going to be a series of events where we feature members of our community to showcase their contribution to open source. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that you can post your questions in the stage chat channel that you see right above on the left side of the screen, right above the stage. Cool, let's get started. For the first edition of Community Spotlight, I'd like to welcome Rakshit Arora, a third year engineering student from India who's made multiple open source contributions within a span of a couple of years. Hi Rakshit, can you hear me?
Hey,
Hey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Let's start by introducing yourself to the audience, shall we?
Sure. So, hey all. First off, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, for giving me this stage, and allowing me to share my experience with the community. So, I'm really excited to share my experience with open source, right? So, I am Rakshit, a forever student, currently in my third year of BTech. What drives me is the passion to bring ideas to life. So what I want to do is to build amazing things that can bring impact on someone's life. Uh, so so other than development, I also spend a lot of time watching animes and listening to music. I also love attending concerts. I have not attended a lot of them, by the way, but quite a few, and I really enjoy the time I spend there. And I really hope that the pandemic situation loosen up a little bit and we can have those concerts and public events back. I am by nature very introverted, so the public speaking and getting involved in community is still new to me. So yeah, thank you.
Great to know that you're an anime fan. You should actually share some of your anime suggestions with the community, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of people who like them.
Definitely. So if someone is just starting up with this with anime, I will highly suggest you to watch Attack on Titans. It's a great anime and a great plot line. So yeah.
Cool, thank you so much.
Uh,
So let's start with getting to know how you got introduced to open source. So tell us about how you came across the world of open source and how has been your experience like?
Yeah, so I was in my first year of college when I got introduced to open source. I was having this SAMend project in my database management system. And college projects are really crazy. Like they will teach you something and they will ask you, to make a big project out of it. For example, they will teach you how to make a tweet and they will ask you to create Twitter out of it. So what I was expected in my first year project was to create a full stack application that uses MySQL as a database, right? At that time we had the first lockdown, right? Uh, so I was at my home and I was spending a lot of time, consuming a lot of internet content at that time, and I
Mhm.
started learning about web development. I learned about HTML, CSS, and I was still very confused about how the full stack integration will work. But eventually, I came across this term known as GitHub, and so I started learning more about it, what GitHub is, and at that time, uh, so for what GitHub for me and what open source for me was a way to share my code and to build a strong profile out of it. So yeah, that was it at that time, and it was not until recently I discovered that open source is more about communities and collaboration and building things together. So I was obviously fascinated by the idea. Imagine your contribution can help a project, and to make that project better. Your small contributions can have huge impact. So that idea really fascinated me and stayed with me, and it's still with me right now. So that was my introduction to open source.
Yeah, I'm sure most of us can relate to it when you say they teach you to tweet and then ask you to build Twitter.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, like you rightly pointed out, community is the backbone of open source, and yep, that's what it's supposed to do. Moving on, tell us something about your experience, your contributions that you've made in the past.
Uh, Yeah, so the first thing which I did was when as soon as I learned about open source, the first thing I did was to make all my projects open source. uh, and that's also a valid contribution, right? So so as soon as I learned about GitHub, I made at that time I had no idea about command line and the git commands. So what I used to do was to drag and drop my code, copy and paste it from my local machine to GitHub.
Mhm.
So that was my first contribution, right? Although at that time it was mostly to build a profile, but as I learned more about it, I learned about the command line stuff, and what is the difference between Git and GitHub, because that was also very vague for me at that time. So I started contributing to different projects by reporting issues and by actively taking part in discussions related to issues. I reported issues to repositories like Laravel, PopOS, Questbook, Starship, and the list goes on. And the first PR which got merged was in Elementary OS. It's a Ubuntu derived operating system, an open source operating system, right? So yeah, that was my first contribution which actually got merged. It was in around October, and it was basically a small typo in the README file, and I fixed it. So yeah, that was my first contribution. It was small, but you have to start somewhere.
That's right. Open source is not about code, it's about contributions,
Right.
technical or non-technical.
Definitely, definitely. I really believe that anyone who may not know coding can also contribute to open source.
That's right. Would you like to tell us about any other contributions that you have made or any other projects that you have started working on?
Yeah, so after my like when the Hacktoberfest was going on, I also contributed to Matmos. So if you don't know, Matmos is an open source alternative to Slack, uh, and it is basically focused for developers. I will drop a link if you want to know more about it in the stage chat.
Sure, yeah, please do that. I'm sure everybody will be interested to take a look on that.
Yeah, so this is Mattermost. It's an open source collaboration for developers. It's an open source alternative for Slack, and it's really great. So Mattermost is having a sub repository called Focal Board, and Focal Board is again an open source alternative to Trello. So if you again if you're not having any idea about what Trello is, Trello is a kind of board where you can plan your project, like to do stuff and all that. So again I will just leave a link for you all.
Yeah, and looks like this wasn't very long ago when you started contributing to open source and when your first PR got merged. How long ago was it?
It was in October. At October, we have this community event called Hacktoberfest,
Right.
where if you like make 4 PRs and if it gets merged, you will get a T-shirt, or you can have a tree by your name. So I went for the tree, by the way. Uh, but yeah, so that event was one of the key motivation which drove me when I started open source.
Right.
Uh,
Hacktoberfest. Yeah, sorry.
Hacktoberfest,
But
yeah.
yeah, Hacktoberfest is indeed a very motivating platform for first timers to get started.
Definitely it is.
Cool. How did you come across Aviel and how did Aviel help you in your journey?
Okay, so what happened was, what I was doing was I was browsing Twitter. Okay, and because at that time I was actively looking for communities to become an active member of. And as you know that one way to find these communities is through Twitter, because most of these activities are communities are active on Twitter, right? So I was browsing Twitter and I came across this post by a person about some swags given by Aviyel to him. So I was intrigued by it, and I think swags never fail to excite a developer. So I wanted to see what Aviyel was all about. Okay, so I visited the Aviyel homepage and I came to know that Aviyel is a platform which helps in making open source projects sustainable by building communities around it. And obviously communities are the backbone of any open source project, so I really loved that idea. Okay, so I decided to contribute to Aviel and even talked about it to the person who was handling Twitter of Aviel at that time. Like I asked him or her that is it possible for me to contribute to Aviel's repository, are they public yet? At that time they were not public, and he told me that we are still working to clean our repository so that it's easier for us to contribute to, but I can contribute to the projects which are featured by Aviyel. So I spent some time there too.
Right. It looks like you're on a very early stage in your career as a student or your professional career.
Yeah.
We've often heard people say that it's very difficult to contribute to open source projects, and you have to be a master in programming to be able to do that. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely not. I think you can contribute to open source projects with even if you don't have a technical background or a coding experience. A lot of these projects are actively looking for documentation maintainers, translators, which does not require any sort of coding experience. When we talk about Hoppscotch, it is actively working on the documentations. So you can contribute to the documentation too. A lot of projects like as I talked about elementary OS are having all those applications under it which needs translation, right? So you can contribute to translations, documentations. Another way which I believe, and I strongly believe in it, that the users can contribute to open source projects without having any technical knowledge, is by reporting issues, because that's how the applications actually improve. So yeah, I don't think that a coding background is required for to contribute actively on open source.
That's right. Translation, advocacy, improving the documentation, writing blogs, and even reporting bugs are great ways to contribute
Yeah.
for anybody who's not from the technical background. Thank you so much for sharing that. Uh, as a beginner, when you were doing your first PR on elementary OS or Matmos for that matter, uh, what did you think was the most difficult part in this journey?
I think it was starting up because when we, as you told, like a lot of people believe that open source is very hard to contribute to and to get started. So
Mhm.
that the first push which we get in doing something, that was very hard for me initially. Like searching for the correct project to contribute to was really tough, and then spending some time on that project to see like what are the how the code works, because I really wanted to contribute to the code of an application. That was my motivation towards open source. So yeah, selecting a project and starting up was really tough for me, but after I started doing the contributions actively, I think it became relatively easier to contribute to any project.
Right, and I believe it's very important to get in touch with the community to have people who are actively working on in a particular project to be able
Yeah.
to help you. Is that correct?
Definitely, definitely. I believe that the community is the core of any open source project, and without a community, a project cannot grow any further. So, joining community is also very important when you are trying to contribute to project, right? So, by joining a community, you can connect to the project at a much deeper level, and you come to know about the team behind that project, right? The ideas behind the project, and what's the philosophy behind that project, and where it is heading, and all that stuff, right? And what drives the team when it contribute to the project. So all these things you come to know after joining the community itself. Communities is also a very great way to share your ideas and how you want the project to be in the future, like what the features you want in the project. It's also a great way to discuss all those your ideas and your thoughts. And joining communities will also definitely help you in your first contribution. So when I was contributing to Hoppscotch, when I learned about Hoppscotch, there were a lot of instances where I got stuck, right? Like the linter was not working for me initially, and I had no idea about the commit convention Hoppscotch team was using, because whenever I tried to commit, it gave me an error. So I was already a member of the Discord channel there. So I asked community for help, like how can I make the linter is not working for me. What can I do? The development server is not working for me, and they're very happy to help. They are glad to help. Even when in elementary OS, when I was just starting up to the contributing towards contributing elementary, I had no idea about how these applications were built or how elementary OS works, right? So there were so many technical buzzwords around it, like Wala, GTK, and all these terms were definitely new to me, right? So that was the amazing community which helped me out. They gave me, like the resources that can help me build those GTK applications. So if you don't know what GTK is, it's basically a framework which allows you to build application for which helps you build cross-platform applications. And if you are really interested in learning more about it, I can also share you the link, the YouTube playlist the community recommended me, sharing it on the stage chat.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Right. So
Sure,
yeah,
we've already. I'm sorry, were you saying something?
no, no.
Sure. We've already mentioned a couple of places about hopscotch now. Would you like to give the audience a brief on what hopscotch is?
Yeah. So basically, a hopscotch is a lightweight, and I'm quoting the documentation in here. It's a lightweight web-based API development suite, and it was built from scratch, like from the ground up, keeping in mind minimalism and user experience, and the overall accessibility of the application, which makes the production and the testing of API way faster than any other application, which is like Postman or stuff, or applications like that.
Cool. I'm guessing you came across hopscotch because you were scrolling through all the other projects that are in the catalog of Aviyel.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. What made you select this project specifically?
There were quite a few reasons for which I decided to contribute to Hopscotch. It was not one. So the first was, as I told you, the core idea of the lightweight API development and testing suite, which is improving the user experience. And since this design is very minimal, it's also making it easier for users to start using it. And it made it the entire process of testing the APIs way more productive. So yeah, this was the first reason I really loved Hopscotch and I wanted to contribute to it. Another reason was the technologies it was built upon. So Hopscotch uses Vue, which was the first web framework I ever learned. So I had a slight inclination towards working for Hopscotch, like contributing to Hopscotch, because of I was already familiar with Vue. And there was another reason. The third reason was that Hopscotch was an active project in the GitHub externship. So if you are new to open source, so GitHub externship is a 90 days fellowship program. I don't know if it's available for other countries, but in India, it basically allows users, like the students, to actively participate in projects, and they will pay you stipend for it. Like if you work for the projects, you will get some stipend. So yeah, that's what GitHub externship is. So basically, Hopscotch was an active project in it. So that was another reason for me to work on Hopscotch.
Right. From the day that you decided to make a contribution till the time when you raised the PR, how long did it take for you approximately?
It took me approximately 1 week to contribute and get the
Wow.
PR merged.
Wow.
And yeah, because I had exams at that time, so a lot of time I was spending in my college studies. Otherwise, it was not a huge issue that will take a lot of time for others.
Cool. Speaking of the issue, how about you tell us what the issue was?
Okay, so it was not a issue in particularly. It was a feature request, right? And I'm quoting the issue itself. So Portstone basically like posted this issue that it would be awesome to set bearer token on socket IO request, just like you do on the REST request. So that was the issue. So yeah, so at that time I had no idea about socket IO request. So basically, socket IO request is a two-way connection. It's a two-way connection between server and the client. So okay, let me give an example. Okay, so for example, you are browsing CricBus, which shows you the score, right? The cricket score. So the score will get automatically updated, right? You don't have to refresh.
That's
So
right.
right? So when we refresh now, basically what we are doing is we are making a REST, a HTTP request to the server, and that gives you the data back. But what socket IO and what this web socket will allow you to do is it will basically connect the server and client. It's a two-way data binding, and it's basically for real-time data, right? So as soon as the someone will uh, score in the match, your screen will automatically get updated because it's connected in a two-way connection. So yeah, at that time socket IO was not having any way to connect to those server which requires authentication. There was no way you can enter the bearer token and connect to those servers, right? So I really liked this issue because I think it is a core feature, so I wanted to contribute to it. And another reason which helped me in contributing was that that the top contributor has shared an article that you can use this particular article to work on this issue. So yeah, so that was the issue I worked on. So let me send you the link to Hoppscotch, and you can actually check that issue out yourself.
Sure,
I
that
would
will be
be, yeah. So this is Hoppscotch, and if you go to Hoppscotch IO right now, in the real-time section on the left side, you will see that there is a socket IO connection, right? And right below it, you will see an authentication type, which is by default none. So there was no authentication type. This UI was not there at all, and you can actually select the bearer token from here and enter the bearer token and connect to any server which requires the bearer token.
Thank you so much for making that. And it really helps a lot of people out there, even if you've not met them or they don't know you personally, but it affects a bigger crowd.
Definitely, yeah. So that's what open source is all about. It actually, your contributions will actually make an impact on the project and the direction it is headed towards. That's why I love it.
That's right. So we talked about the issue that you were working on, and now people know about Hopscotch. For somebody starting new to Hopscotch, how would you suggest they should go about it? Is there a document they should follow? Are there guidelines on the website?
Yeah. So there is definitely Hopscotch is having a documentation which is still in active development. So for me personally, what I did was when I was browsing, Aviyel's project list, I was uh, I was looking at the about page of every project, right? And what Aviyel is having is all the social links of that project, like the Twitter, the GitHub, the uh, you know everything about it, right? The Discord is also there. And so yeah, so the first thing I did was and I would highly suggest to anyone who is contributing to any project is to join the official Discord or Slack or whatever they use for community. So this is the first thing I did. I joined their Discord. Next thing is to read the contributing guidelines. Hopscotch is having a great contributing guideline there. So it's in the contributing.md. So if you go to their GitHub, and let me share their GitHub to you so that you can also check their repositories out.
Sure, that'd be great.
Right. Yeah. Right. So if you browse this repository, you will find a contributing.md file. So this is having the contributing guidelines for Hopscotch. So I read those contributing guidelines, and the third thing is to find the issue you want to work on, right? Or maybe the documentation you want to work on, or any feature, right? So I was browsing these issues, and a good way to select an issue is to go to the labels part of issues and select good first issue, because usually a lot of these projects are having this label good first issue, which is basically have issues that are good for newcomers, those who are coming, new developers that are just starting with the project itself. So uh, go through the good first issues and select the issue you want. I selected the socket IO one, and then the third thing is to set up that that project locally, that is also that will also take a lot of your time. So you can take community help there. I personally took a lot of community help in setting the project for me, because as I told that my linter was not working at that time. So Lias helped me out setting up the repository, the local development for Hoppscotch. So I set it up locally and then start testing it out. Start changing the code, start reading it, spend some time with code, and eventually, you will realize, okay, these are the things that I want to add to the application to make it work. And if you still don't have any idea like how you can go about it, another thing you can do is to look for the pull requests that are already merged and that are related to your issue. Like authentication, I looked for the pull requests that are related to authentication. Like, since Hopscotch is already having authentication for REST API, right? So you can search that code and you can take some parts from the code that is already written by the contributors, and you can modify it according to your own needs.
Right. I remember you mentioned towards the start of the call that it was really overwhelming for you to understand the code architecture and the code convention and stuff like that. How did you go about that? Did you find any good tutorials that you could share with the community?
Yeah, definitely. So the problem which I faced personally was that Hopscotch was using composition API for Vue. So composition API is basically a recent development in Vue, and it was introduced in Vue 3. And when I learned Vue, I learned Vue 2, right? So there was no composition API at that time. So the code that was foreign to me basically. It was not the Vue I used to write. So I spent some time learning about it, and this is also a great pros of call it open source, that you will spend a lot of time with the project, and you will eventually end up learning a lot of things, right? A lot of new things. So I followed Net Ninja's tutorial, and yeah, I'm having the video saved with me. So let me just quickly share that too.
Sure. While you're sharing that, is there anything interesting that you're working on right now? Really curious.
Yes, I'm working on two projects right now. One of them is called Column. So I recently started learning more and more about Web3 because I really loved the idea that the community powers an application. It's not the user's data or the advertisements or the algorithms that are made so that you spend more and more time on that application. It's the community which powers it. I really loved that idea. So I spent a lot of time learning about it, and I took I participated in one hackathon. It was the Bidalit hackathon that was for Polygon network, right? So I started working on this application called Column. So Column is basically a micro blogging platform for which is powered by Polygon Matic, where users can share their articles, and that article like other users can give value to that article, spending giving money to that article, and that money that would be in cryptocurrency basically in Matic will be directly sent to the author of that the article itself. So I'm still actively working on that project because there are a lot of features that are missing from that project as of now. So this is one project I'm working on. Another project I'm working on is called Crystal with a K, because most of my projects start with K. So yeah, so the Crystal is a noise suppression application for Linux, because right now if you use Discord on Linux, there is no noise suppression there. In Windows and in Mac OS, we have Crisp on Linux, on Discord, but Linux is not having it as of now. So what Crystal will do is it will use deep learning to reduce and remove the noise that comes from your microphone, and then it will send that to Discord. So I think it will help a lot of people which are using Discord. So these are the two projects I'm actively working on as of now.
Cool. Blockchain and AI, both technologies that everybody is looking forward to at this point. And I'm sure a lot of people in the community would be really interested in knowing about these two projects that you mentioned. I'd request you to share the links if you can in the stage chat so that people.
Definitely, definitely. So when it comes to Column, Column is using TypeScript, right, for the front end, and Solidity for the back end. So let me share the links with you so that you everyone can contribute to it.
Sure. While you're sharing the links, we'll just wait for a minute or so for people to ask their questions. Uh, just a reminder, on your left above the stage, you'll find a channel called Stage Chat where you can drop your questions. We'll we'll be around for a couple of minutes more, I think, to answer your questions.
And when it comes to Crystal, it is using GTK for the Vala language for the front end part, and the back end. I'm still thinking about it. How will I go about? So I have no idea how I make Crystal work, but that's how a lot of my projects go. Like I'm learning about stuff and I build something related to that stuff, and then I learn from building it. It's like that.
It's really commendable to see all the hard work that you're putting in for the betterment of the community, and we wish you all the best for the journey.
Thank you so much.
So I came across an interesting tweet today which read, and I quote, "Does your app have a page to credit all the open source libraries used in building it? If not, why?" This is something that I think most of us take for granted, but we should ideally be having a page which has a list of all the open source libraries which we use and giving credit to them. On that note, thank you so much, Rakshit, for joining us and everybody in the audience for being so supporting in whatever we do. Looking forward to see you in the next session. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you so much.